How's it going? It's bigSHow, theGod. So today's topic is creative outcomes. I thought of this morning, and I guess a lot of the stuff I've been talking about regarding reviewing, analyzing, change, practicing, self-awareness, all these types of things. They all can create a kind of a creative side to them. And that's why I call them creative outcome. I guess it comes back to the curiosity, the understanding the building blocks, and what we might frame as being creative is an outcome of this type of way of thinking. And if you're thinking like this all the time, then inevitably through discussion, through observation, through reflection, through widening your self-awareness, through a better understanding, through learning, and through applying logic and reason and common sense and all these types of bundles together, what seems to come out of that, in my opinion, is quite a creative outcome. And then from that outcome, you do the process again. So I was talking to a friend this morning, and we were talking about mathematics. And you're struggling to have his show his daughter how to do the mathematics. And even though you'd learn a process or learn a formula or learn a method of applying a formula, something simple with algebra, say, like BODMAS or one of the other types of methods you would use to help you get to the answer, is that over time you would look at the answer rather than the method. So when you're learning, you can learn the method, but you haven't got the experience of understanding the answer. You know what I mean? So you do a x equals whatever, and you do the math, you do it, and you get an answer. And the answer requires some thinking around the answer, or some experience will tell you that's probably in the right ballpark. Yep, I can double check that. So without even realizing it, you're being curious about the answer, or you're confirming your answer. You haven't just left it for the equation. Although that comes after a while, you do it. What ends up missing there is the process of validating this answer. Correct? 10 times 10 equals 100. Well, that's what it says. If you don't question it, it's just 100. 100 what? Now, is that correct? Now, 10 times 10 equal 50. Yeah, I did the method. I've done the sum. It's 50. You see, if you, even regardless of the answer, still requires the curiosity, the validation step, the review, right? So that's what I'm talking about as a simplistic method. And from that way of thinking, of being curious on it, how you got there, you then go backwards again. So you turn it around from the answer, you be curious, and you explore the method, and then another method comes to validate this answer. Then another method can be done to either be more efficient on the method. You can have 2 methods, 3 methods. You can be comfortable with a method of coming up with the answer. You might come up with it in your head. You might have to write it down. Still 2 levels of comfortable. It's more efficient if I do it in my head. But is it using more resources to validate my answer versus a calculator for that particular thing, right? So when you have both, or when you have that method of having to validate the answer, reconfirm it, review it, and all that stuff. Now we're getting into that layer of, or that level of detail. So the more detailed we are, the more creative we can be, correct? Well, it's not actually more creative, it's just creative. So if we go further in and blow up the method more, then maybe the method can be tweaked. And we can be we can be creative with how we get to an answer. So I know mathematics is quite arbitrary and it has a way, but there's still 3, 4, 5 methods of getting to this answer. Whatever answer there is, in science, there's generally more than one way of getting to that answer. That's what science requires. Requires more than one way to get to that answer. So in its own way, it's promoting creativity. And so that's my perspective of creative outcomes from this way of looking at the answer, looking at how we got there, knowing the method, knowing that that's one method. What's the other? I know what's another method. What's the answer? What's another answer? Because remember, this answer may be built off. If I need this to be something else, which feeds off into other pieces of this process. If we've got a two-piece process, okay. But if that's connected to 10 other pieces, and we're gonna tweak something to affect this piece of the end result of this string, correct? So that's a basic outline of where I sit with let's get that up again, with that type of mindset. Bring it up on here. Here we go. So then there's the gaps. So for me, I've had this way of thinking since I can remember. So because you have a creative mindset based on some boundaries, you start solving problems which create more problems or create more questions. we'll rephrase that instead of being questioning as a problem, just create more questions. So then we start looking for gaps in that. We go, okay, so if we're self-aware that creative outcomes come from this way of thinking, what are the issues with that? There's positives, and then what are the positives, and then these are the results. But what ultimately creates issues from that as well. So you got positive and negatives, depending on your debate. Because as I mentioned before, each of these processes can lead you to where you are today, right? So if you identify yourself as something, and it's just got a creative mindset. Right now, it's the result you're getting from having that creative mindset. If you've got evidence for it, if you've got a breakdown of it, you personally believe it, all that sort of stuff of this creative mind, here's your outcomes. Where you are right now is that's been the sum result of those. And unless you've got historic measures to say, well, I created this and I followed this through and I did A, B, C, and here I am now. That's the positive way of looking at it. The argument to that would be, my goal was to be this. Correct? Because from a creative outcome, I'm suggesting that that's required to change, to have motivation, to have part of the mindset, to have a piece of the change. Right? So that's what this is about. Is that when you have that curiosity, when you have that motivation and have that creative mindset, where that sends you down is understanding that if it's led you here, but your goals are here, what's going on then? Where's the gap? Where's the parts that we're not doing? Or where's the parts that maybe this chunk of time's going down? So that leads us into things like, thinking on my feet here, things like procrastination. Let's use that as a word. Avoidance, laziness, distractions. Those, we can start with those three, right? They kind of cover quite a lot. So distractions are generally there, and tools that we have in place to try and reduce the distractions. Distractions versus focus. You know, and then you got procrastination versus action versus just do it, I guess, or do the work. And some of that can come from a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. You can be as creative as you want, but if you're fixed on pieces of that, how's that hindering a growth mindset that's willing to re-explore those or reevaluate the method, the process, the result, and so on down the string. And then there's the piece on that is by saying, well, why am I even involved in this particular subject? Is that towards the measurement of my goal? Most times it is, because we'll probably argue that doing is better than not doing, but it depends on the expense or the cost. And the reason I say it by that narrative, and this is when I get back into my linear versus. So linear to me, in my way of phrasing it, is that we're good at something and we continue to do it repeatedly with bugger all thought, and we're just good at that thing. And the more we practice and train things, we just might be more efficient at it, but we're still doing, in my opinion, linear, the same thing. It doesn't widen our horizons. If I look at it from that arbitrary way. Whereas linear just continues to, here's my narrow. Now, if I learn some more about it, I might do that, but it's still narrow. Whereas if we got that, and now I'm doing something totally different to totally what this is involved in, then to me that widens. If there's another skill added to do the same thing, then it went like that. But it's using the same skills, same repetitive things, then it's just that. You with me? So if I look at that in the same context as with a creative mindset, say, yeah, I'm creative mindset, but I keep doing that the same way. Sure, I'm practicing it, I'm doing it more efficiently, I'm doing it better. But unless I'm doing this to it, it's not providing much more value, if that makes sense. The value is this. Now, we can string some value to it in ways, in my opinion, to if I'm getting an outcome from it. So if I'm getting an outcome from it where maybe going for a run right now, it's just a bit of numbers, it's repetitive, it's the same. I didn't run faster, I didn't run slower, I didn't run further, I didn't, those are two factors of it. I didn't get my heart rate higher, I didn't sweat more, I don't know, I didn't get hotter, but you achieve that. So you can go, well, that's an example of a linear function, but it still ticked a box because I'm going to do it again tomorrow, repetitive. And you could argue that still has a positive outcome. So if that was a 40-minute run, which physically did these three things to me, from a lung to a breathing to a mental to an emotional to a muscular kind of, the whole thing, you would still have that as a positive outcome, even though it was the same. Same as having a nutritious meal that you've worked out and gained and thing. That doesn't have to change tomorrow or now. You've eaten that. So there's always going to be bundles that become into that thing. And then when you do one of them, you might extend it slightly. It won't extend. It will extend linear. More, less, faster. It's still linear in a sense. So widening it to me is different again. Widening it, which is what we're after. So with a creative mindset, or creative outcomes, is how that feeds in, and where's the representation of widening that or growing that area? So part of it is kind of understanding the self-awareness of this concept and of this stuff, and then looking at it from a view of where in this can we, or can I, improve my awareness of the state I'm in. So I'm always in this creative mindset, certain times during the day. Where's the gaps that are keeping me from progressing? Or is this creative mindset just a state that I'm in all the time? And it's just a way that I think. But because this is another way of being positively aware versus arguably negatively aware. So we can go procrastination. It seems to be a negative word, and we can pick on what I haven't done. And that can lead you down what you haven't done. Why haven't you done it? You'll never do it. You've tried it before. It'll just be the same. Procrastination. Procrastinating now. While I'm doing this, I could be doing something else. Right? Whereas, this is just my debate I'm having, is with me questioning the outcomes and being aware of creative outcomes that come from everything I do, and then suggesting, am I utilizing these creative outcomes as efficiently as well? Am I aware of these creative outcomes and capturing that as best as I can? Correct? Now I've got a loose system where I take notes better. I write things down more, and then I have a review process and a way of going back to those notes to put me back there, which is one growth piece to the creative outcomes. From that, I will share those ideas, which is another push forward from the creative process, capturing that, sharing it, listening for feedback, seeing where it goes, and then reviewing, analyzing, and progressing to the next piece. Now, on some of those, we would argue, as long as they're based on the goals that we've set, then that's where the energy should be spent. Correct? So it's a matter of, when you always have this creative way of thinking, a conversation right now can lead me down to somewhere else. I can have a conversation with someone else, and we can go backwards and forwards about it in a creative way, in a questioning way, in a curious way, to ask questions. Was that a good use of my time? Was that just something I always do? Is that take away from the focus, or is that a positive way to do things, or is it, which is where I'm leading to, is that too random? It's got to be too random, and that's where you get to. The more you record, the more you review, the more you ask yourself questions, go, well, that's quite random. Is that organized? Is that how I planned my day? And so all things lead back to what you did today, how you planned your day. Did you follow your plans of today? And while you're doing what you planned today and use the creative process or creative outcomes through your planning and preparing and questioning and sharing, through that conversation piece or through that piece of the process that you were going through, is that what you actually did? Did you follow up again? Did you go through it again? To continue to keep things progressing. So what this highlights is the importance, or the fundamental the fundamental blocks of the planning and the preparing is understanding within yourself what you're actually doing every time you don't plan it, or don't execute what you planned, or you haven't planned enough, or you haven't created a self-awareness to what you're doing at the time, which is what this process is doing, right? Is me understanding that I do this. And now I question that I do it, and what was that doing while I did it? Now, there's plenty of times where that's benefiting this person. This person gets ideas from it. This person goes away and thinks about the questions I asked. So I provided that as a value, which is fine. But what did that take away from what I had planned to do for the goals I had set? Correct. Now, if they're in the wheelhouse of the goals that I've got set, then we can justify it, or we can review it and analyze it. But if they're not, then we can question it again. So I like that. So this means something I've been sort of questioning with myself for the last 2 or 3 years. And I've made conscious decisions of how to review how I spend these interactions or times with others or with myself, or how I spend that time. And what I've noticed is that every time I get another learning, I learn something else about another tool, how much it complements the system that I'm currently running. And I can be more effective in how it can benefit myself more in different ways. So I went through a couple of things, and I framed it. I got given a piece which was like fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. I was given a few examples of the two. And I framed it slightly different in that, in my opinion, I'll always have both. But it may appear as a fixed mindset until the evidence suggests differently. Just like the math equation, that method worked and it gave the result. You could argue I've got a fixed mindset to that. I've got a fixed mindset to lots of the scientific methods of the outcomes. That doesn't mean I don't have a growth mindset. But from a fixed mindset, or I've sort of seemed odd to frame it this way, but I get it. I get the context it was tried to be moved in, which is why I struggle with a lot of sayings, because I get hung up on the fixed versus the growth. Fixed to me means no movement. I have this way. I guess it's an absolutes. When I talk absolutes, like never, I won't, I can't, I'm not going to, versus a growth mindset, you would argue that I can. Okay, let's look into that. What does that mean? Where are you coming from? What's that perspective mean? So we go perspective, doesn't mean I've changed this. Here's the known and proven, potentially, whatever level it's gotten to. Now, I'm entertaining this one over here. So I've done both, if you want to look at it as a fixed or a growth. Whereas I always think I'm not absolute to anything. So I guess I could look at fixed as being, well, you're fixed here until we move you. Fixed means I can take you off and put you over somewhere else, can't I? I'm fixed to it. Fixed, I guess, does allow for movement. But it didn't come to my mind as obviously to me. To me, fixed meant stubborn or stuck or locked or unshakable. Fixed. That's what I assert to that. Then there was another one that was amateur versus professional. And that's either a mindset or what's the difference. So I went the same on that too, to be honest. I think you can be both. But I understand what, in the context of a debate, amateur, what's the difference between an amateur and a professional? There's definitely traits and differences between the two. But I'm saying on any subject matter, you can do both. So those were some of the battles I have with myself, with how things are worded or how things are presented to me. I understand the logic. I understand the frame set you put it in. But see how my mind and my creative mind, or not even creative mind, my curious and my questioning mind, make sure that I'm not getting too locked into the example and then that word meaning that. A lot of times that's to verify that we both are in sync. Your definition and my definition for this piece is the same, because words have lots of definitions or meanings to them. So if we can both be in sync, or the group can be in sync with how you're phrasing this word, then I'm cool. But when I spin it around and put it into this context, is it still appropriate to that context? Which is like a mathematical method. You can't move the method around and expect the results to always be the same. So you got to be careful. And then it's kind of like, what's my output trying to be? What's the outcome trying to be within the audience? So yeah, so I never get stuck on, when I say never, I don't look to get stuck on too much on the words that they're using, just the methodology. Because a lot of times it's kind of just more to help steer you to an example. Stick it in some words, and when you think of those words, here's an example. It's a bit like how we abbreviate. What's that one? Oar in the water. You got a boat. I think I said this the other day. And OAR in the acronym OAR, ownership, accountability, and responsibility. I guess the same way of coming up with a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. You can then trigger yourself off to how those two, what the differences are. And then question yourself, am I fixed? If I am, understand that. Am I using the growth methodologies and processes? Yes, no. To try and allow you to practice some of those things regularly. So yeah, so that creative mindset or creative process is awesome. Obviously, reducing distractions, but realizing that you have to do the work and put in the time. I guess part of this is to say, doing the work, but am I doing work that's linear? Rather than doing work that widens me, that challenges me, that makes me feel uncomfortable, that is a struggle, even within this creative mindset. Because if it's just comfortable and I'm always able to do that, then that's questionable. But every time I self-evaluate and self-look at my own awareness of this, that I do have a creative outcomes coming out of everything I speak about, realizing this, understanding that this is going on, really questioning it, and suggesting, am I doing enough on the outcome, or is this working really well for me? And how can I improve it? Right? That's where the positive side comes from it. Because in the same framework, if I look at that same point that I just said, I can go, I haven't done what didn't I do? The procrastination, haven't focused, been distracted. Here we go. Negative is if I go, I just turned it into an opportunity. Where's the opportunity from this creative way of thinking? So yeah, spun that into as positive.